But let's be honest here. There are two kinds of people in this regard. There are wordy people that are humble. They just use a lot of words.
Yes.
And then there are wordy people that are arrogant. I am less likely to confront someone that is wordy and arrogant because I feel like they're not going to listen. Because they have a spirit about them that they think that's a spirit of self-importance. Welcome to this week's edition of The Glass House. We have another treat for you. We've been doing something a little different, mixing it up a little bit, where I bring a subject that I think is fun to talk about. Lynley has no idea what I'm about to drop, and I'm going to talk about it for a little bit, and then we're going to discuss it. Because, Lynley, you always bring color commentary. So here's what I want to talk about first today. I want to talk about why people don't listen better.
Oh.
I think it's the most important skill in ministry, the least taught. When I interview people here at Lifeway, I notice immediately whether they're good listeners or whether they just like to talk a lot. So I'm going to start with a real-life fictional story. And
Did you want to name anyone in particular?
No.
Okay.
Listen to this story. Ethan closed his laptop and glanced at the clock. Noon. He'd been dreading this meeting all morning. Every month, like clockwork, he and Brian, the regional director, met for lunch to connect. But if Ethan was honest, he always left these lunches feeling more alone than when he arrived. At the diner, Brian was already seated. He'd stood to greet Ethan with a firm handshake and a booming, "Brother, how's life treating you?" Before Ethan could answer, Brian launched in. "Man, let me tell you, last week was crazy. I had to jump in and fix this mess in Louisville, and then I flew to Dallas, red-eye flight. You ever taken one of those? Brutal." Ethan smiled politely, nodding, and he managed to slide in a sentence or two about a tough conversation he'd had with a staff member. But Brian quickly pivoted. "You know what I've always said about staff and conflict. If you don't handle it head on, it festers." Off he went again, telling stories about his own staff woes. And Ethan sat there feeling lonely, completely unheard. How often do people experience this? Not just in life, but in ministry. Have you ever walked away from a conversation feeling more alone than when it started? Well, what really got me thinking about this was recently I was in a meeting and I noticed how much one person was talking. And other people in the room, I was watching body language, slowly, one by one, were checking out. And this person, who is highly skilled, was not understanding that they needed to stop talking. And so I went back to this book you and I discovered years ago called Why Don't We Listen Better?
That was when I was attempting to get a master's degree.
Yes,
in
you were
counseling.
thinking about it.
I got 2 classes in.
But I'm so glad you did, because you entered that whole little deal you did brought us to this book, because I think it's one of the best books.
That's right.
Why Don't We Listen Better by Jim Peterson. And I want to read a couple of paragraphs of what it was like for him growing up, and then we can talk about it. Here's what he said. "As a somewhat shy high schooler in the middle of all that mayhem, I often found myself listening as others went on, wrapped up in their own thinking. I learned that listening pays dividends. Occasionally, someone who seldom got along with anyone would visit. They took to me, and I liked that. At first, I hoped it meant I was particularly charming and likable, but I soon figured out they liked me because I would sit and listen to them. And don't we all like an audience? I observed that while others avoided grumpy people, all I had to do to reduce their grump factor was to ask questions and let them tell me their stories. And one of the payoffs was that these folks became interesting as I listened. I also found that after I paid enough attention to their personal and political tirades, they became receptive to me too. And here's what I learned about communicating. Here's the bottom line. Listen a little while, talk until the other person stops hearing, and listen until the person calms enough to hear again." Listen, here's the art of conversation. Listen for a little while. Talk until the other person you can tell is no longer hearing, and then listen again until the person is calm enough to hear again. I wish there was a whole seminary class on this.
Mm-hmm.
If we could impart to our 4 children no other skill than the skill of being able to listen, interject, and listen again, it would be the skill that would multiply all other talents. And nobody talks about this anymore. The art of conversation. Well, for those of you listening, one of the great challenges that we faced when we became church planters was that we had small children. And so in order to build a church plant, you have to have dinner with lots of people, have them into your home, hospitality. And one of the things that I'm really grateful God used in our life was we had no choice but to teach our children how to sit at a table, ask a question, and listen. Often for us, it meant we had to plant a question. Before people would show up, we'd be like, what question is each of you going to ask? And one of them would be like, what's your favorite ride at Disney? But I do think it's something in ministry that doesn't get discussed enough about why church staff people don't listen to church people.
One thing to point out is that we would have them, if they were able and old enough, to have a follow-up question, which would go with what Jim Peterson was saying is listen, ask a question, listen again. It's kind of that pattern, of asking another thing. So it's not just asking a question, because then the person can be tempted to ask that question and then take over again. It's the art of follow-up.
One of the reasons I wanted to ask you about this is I actually think you're really good at this, better than me. When someone...
me too.
You are way better at this.
I'm kidding.
When I'm with someone who is very verbose, I just shut down. You are much better at staying in it. How do you do that? How do you stay engaged with someone who just keeps talking?
Because I feel like if somebody keeps talking, they need someone to listen to them. I just feel like something's going on in their world. If they have so much to say that they don't have the EQ to realize that the conversation is not going both ways, then my sympathy rises for them. And I feel like something, and they may not even share it with me, but something's going on in their life where they feel like there's nobody listening to them. Because a healthy person right in the middle of, where, we've talked about this before, where they're right in the middle of the window of tolerance and everything feels good, they know the art of having a conversation back and forth. But if somebody's just talking and talking, maybe nobody at home is listening to them. Maybe they feel unseen. Maybe their work is really stressful. And so I just kind of feel like, well, they need someone to listen to them. So I can be that person. It also helps. I'm not a big talker. If you and I are in a car sometimes, I am totally fine with just silence sometimes. I don't have to fill a space with words. I'm not a good storyteller. I don't come up with things easily of do you remember this? Or do you remember that? Or, what a funny story. And so it comes very easy for me to just be able to sit there and listen.
Well, you're really good at it.
Well, thank you.
I've noticed that. I've been challenged by it because it is a service. I think it's interesting how you just created listening as a service. You're doing someone a service. They have all this stuff in them that has to come out, and somebody has to receive all those words. And you view it as a kind of washing people's feet.
I also think it's a personality. To be able to receive someone's conversation is a personality. I'm not a high drama person. I don't take on the feelings of other people. So to listen to them, it doesn't become my problem. And I think maybe that's that I don't have a high gift of mercy. I don't mean that even sarcastic, but I can just listen for what it is. Assume that whatever they're telling me is their side of the story. There's a different side of the story. Then there's the truth. And I can just be kind of objective to it all. I'm not going to get inflamed or flared up and, oh my gosh, well, you should do this, that, or the other. It's just kind of a, man, I'm sorry you're going through that kind of thing.
Let's take the Ethan and Brian example and make it a church staff example.
Okay.
Let's say there's someone out there listening. The person they report to is very wordy. So they're not looking forward to the check-in every week because they know they're just going to sit there and listen to this person talk. How would you advise them to navigate that relationship? Because here's the problem. Ethan was feeling very lonely in that. He was starting to feel resentful. So how would you encourage somebody who's regularly going to a meeting where they know they're not going to be heard?
Personally, I would probably have to address it just with my personality to say, we're on the same team. We're trying to row the same boat, and I don't feel like you're interested in my perspective. Or have I done something that makes you uncomfortable? Have I said something that makes you not curious about my life? Am I oversharing? Am I undersharing? I mean, I would just kind of want to probe at the reason as to why we're not going back and forth. But I know that I'm probably a little bit different in that. A lot of people don't want to have that kind of conflict. I mean, you and I have where we make, I'm going to say Donnie's name since he's right here, and that makes it neutral. But when we used to come home from work and we would know the same people, he would say, "I've been Donnied." And, like we would kind of make them into, an action verb.
It became a verb. To
Yes.
get Donnied meant you got stuck in a conversation you could not get out of.
Yes. And so we won't say actual names, but it was like, "Oh, we've been Donnied." And so we talked about that a lot. But that's something that I can't put up with that as easily as you can, I think.
But here's where the real challenge comes as a Christian. Is God does wire some people to have a lot more words.
Right. That's what I was saying earlier.
Part of my sanctification is learning to have tolerance for people who say more than they need to say.
But I think you're talking about two different people. I mean, when you were talking about neighbors or friends or something, that's different to me. And so I have a lot of patience for somebody like that and feel like maybe they just need to say a lot of words. But then you said the staff environment.
Well, yeah, even in staff environments, we don't always choose who we work with.
Well, I know, but when you do have to work together and you don't want to dread having a meeting with that person, then it's different to me than, a neighbor or a friendship or something like that. So I actually think you're talking about two different things. And I relate to those people very differently in how I would respond.
Okay, but how would you address it? Because here's the question. If you start to address it, they're going to interrupt you and start talking. So when you go to this person, you say, "Hey, Donnie, I would like to have a conversation with you about, I feel like in our meetings, I don't get to share much." And then Donnie's immediately going to start talking for the next 10 minutes about all the reasons why. How would you address that? Would you interrupt him?
No, well, when that was over, I'd probably say, "Would you like to hear my perspective?" I mean, after they've talked for 10 minutes and, I kind of puts people on the spot and not in a rude way. It really upsets me when people talk about confrontation as in it's all bad. Because, we talk about this sometimes too, like the peacemaker. I loved the book Peacemaker. I think so many times people are not actually peacemaking, they're peace faking. And so confrontation gets a bad rap, but to say to somebody lovingly, like, the wounds of a friend can be trusted. I don't feel like this is a shared relationship. I don't feel like I'm being heard in this work environment. That's very different than, if a neighbor comes over and wants to talk. I mean, we're not necessarily rowing the same boat. So that is an occasion for me just to listen and have compassion. Whereas, if it's an ongoing, I do think if it's an ongoing thing. Somebody told us this a long time ago. The Bible it says it is to a man's glory to overlook an offense. But the book we read said, but not a pattern. And so I think if this is an offense every once in a while, and it's not typical with the person that maybe a few meetings have gone very one-sided, well, that's just like something's going on with them personally. But if it's a pattern, then I would want to be confronted if I had a pattern of doing something that was really frustrating people and they didn't enjoy working with me. And so, to grow, I mean, the only way to grow is to begin acknowledging like hardships between relationships. And I guess what bothers me is that the gospel is that we are all broken and none of us are perfect, but yet we can't confront each other. Why? Because we're going to offend each other. Why would we not be open to saying, "Yeah, man, you're so right. And that is one of my weaknesses. And I'm so glad you pointed it out and we can work together."
But let's be honest here. There are two kinds of people in this regard. There are wordy people that are humble. They just use a lot of words.
Yes.
And then there are wordy people that are arrogant. I am less likely to confront someone that is wordy and arrogant because I feel like they're not going to listen. Because they have a spirit about them that they think that's a spirit of self-importance. So the challenge, let's say in the scenario I just gave you, the challenge you have in that scenario where you're reporting to somebody who's like that is that if you confront them and it doesn't go well, it will come back on you.
Yeah, that's true.
So I would be very careful to confront someone like that and maybe even seek out counsel. If I feel like someone is humble, I would be willing to have that conversation, and I would probably put it in writing first. I would put it in writing first so that they could hear my concern and not respond. I would say, hey, I wanted to write you a note and share something with you that I've been wanting to share with you.
See, I think that's more dangerous because tone is so misunderstood
But
in
if
writing.
they're humble, it'll just lead to a conversation and we'll clean it up.
But you're making a judgment that they're humble or arrogant, and you don't really know.
I'm totally making a judgment.
What if it's false humility, or what if it's, an insecure arrogance? I mean, we talked about this sometimes. Like sometimes people on stage are actually the most insecure people you know, but they come across like they are so, so comfortable up there. So why treat people differently based on our own judgments versus just saying,
because that's what human beings do.
well, I know, but I'm just saying it feels unfair because all that does is create a root of bitterness. And so if the option is either confront or be bitter, what do you do?
Coming from the person who has no problems confronting anybody.
No, that's not true. I do have problems confronting people.
You are the most natural at it.
I don't delight in it. Like I don't
You just
find
are very
it.
natural at it. Look in our home. Look in our home. Who confronts the kids 9 times out of 10?
I would have gone 10 out of 10.
You're just very comfortable confronting people. I am not that comfortable.
But are the kids resentful?
No. I'm just saying this is me and my unhealthy self.
I'm
I
not saying
don't
it's unhealthy.
know when I'm sizing up a situation, I'm looking for 2 things. Okay. They use a lot of words. I don't feel heard. Are they humble or arrogant? If they're humble, I will probably find a way to talk about it. If they're arrogant, I'll probably just write them off. Not proud of that, but that's how I work.
So what would you do then? Like why, if you're just going to write people off? Like you're asking me what to do. So the option is either confront an arrogant person or write them off?
I'm not saying this is right. This is not a biblical argument. Okay. This is just real humanity here. This is how I normally deal with relationships.
Really?
Yeah.
Thanks for that. After 24 years.
I actually enjoy having hard conversations with people when
Yeah, I know that.
I have a sense that it's going to lead to growth. But if it's a person that you can just tell, this person just really thinks a lot of himself or herself, I will stay cordial. I will do everything I can to avoid the meeting. Or, I got to leave.
But what if you're misunderstanding them? And what if people feel the same way about you? Because you're actually very confrontable, but what if people think that you're not?
I know. You're right about it. I'm saying what a lot of people feel, I think.
I know.
I think there's a lot of people in church staff that wish they could confront a situation, but they don't feel like the person would listen. So that's what I'm really gnawing at here.
I know. I mean, I know. And I don't want the listener to think that I enjoy confrontation. Or that it comes so natural to me that you're going to walk up to me at, the SBC and I'm just going to tell you exactly what I think about your outfit or your hair or whatever. That's not true.
No, that's not you.
I do definitely know how to filter. I've learned that. I mean, in pastoring wife, what you are talking about to me is somebody that I have to have an ongoing relationship with, and I have to be very honest with them to be able to continue on without bitterness. So, I don't want the listener to hear like, whoa, I don't want to come across her because she's going to just like tell me everything she thinks. But I'm talking about within a staff. And I do think it's very difficult. There's so many different scenarios here because if you are confronting someone that's above you, that's a totally different scenario than a lateral person.
I have an idea.
Okay.
For Christmas, buy this person a copy of Why Don't We Listen Better?
That's not passive at all. Maybe go ahead and highlight a few things.
I really thought you would enjoy this book.
I've highlighted a few things that I thought you might get a kick out of.
Well, I wanted to have this discussion because I think there are a lot of people out there serving in churches that feel this pain. We don't have easy answers for them, but I do think Peterson's book, Why Don't We Listen Better, really helped me understand the art of conversation and how important it is to have some give and take.
Well, but you have to have some resolution. We can't just close it off and be like, here's what I'd do, here's what you'd do.
Okay, what's your tip? Because I've got a couple.
I didn't say mine. I said you have to have some sort of resolution.
Here's a couple things. I do think Scripture says we should be quick to listen and slow to speak. So
yeah,
every scenario where someone's being wordy, it's an opportunity for me to practice that I can just listen. Second of all, it's not good for resentment to grow in our hearts. There may come a point where you have to risk your job. If it's turning you into a monster, or you're coming home every night and your family's feeling the resentment, at some point you have to confront the person and say, look, this may mean that we don't get to work together in the future, but I have to have the courage to say this. I can't continue to function in a relationship where it's one-sided, and put some boundaries down. But that takes a lot of courage, particularly when you're in a job where you need the income.
Right.
And you don't have the luxury of going and finding another job. So all that's spiritually discerned. But I would say communication, sometimes people say, so-and-so was a great communicator. And almost always it's this person was on stage speaking.
They're a great talker.
They're just a talker.
Yeah.
Communication is communion. Speaking from the other side, what if someone's listening here and they realize they're the talker? They naturally dominate conversations.
They probably don't realize it if they're the talker, but maybe they could be thinking, I wonder, which one am I in the conversation?
I mean, to that person, I would say very simply, go to the people who report to you and ask them the question, are you happy with the quality of our conversations? And just let it sit. Don't say anything else. Or it might even be better to send that in writing.
Yeah.
To say, hey, I've been thinking that I talk too much in meetings. And as excited as I am about this subject that we talk about, I want to hear from other people. Do you feel like our meetings are a reflection of good communication? And then give them some time to think about it and say, I would really like to sit down and talk to you about that next week.
Yeah, I agree with that method better, because even me, who does not typically shy away from it, if you came to me and said, do you think I talk too much? I mean, I would probably even stammer around like, no, I mean, I enjoy our meetings. And it would be hard to know what to say exactly right then. So I would think that the average person would not have the confidence or the courage to say their true feelings at that moment.
I would issue this warning to you if you're that person. I have coached this a half dozen times, and I've yet to see anyone make progress. You have to take it very seriously. Almost like you go into a meeting and you have $50 to spend. And once those dollars are all passed out, you have no words left. You have to think about words in a meeting that way. So if you go in there and you just fill up the air, you spent all your money in the first 5 minutes of the meeting. So holding back some till other strategic moments where when you do speak, it matters.
I will say one other thing. I know we're going over time a little bit, but you and I have talked about this a lot now, being almost 6 years at Lifeway versus in a church. It's interesting in a church, there's very little, yearly reviews within the staff. At Lifeway, every person gets a year-end review with a supervisor. And you've talked about this before. Pastors and senior pastors and other pastors need to be doing some form of yearly review and asking the people below them, do you feel good about our level of communication?
Absolutely.
Why are we not doing that like we do in the business world? Because then there's no method, there's no way to ever get rid of a staff member that's unhealthy or ineffective, because there's no sort of methodology for the hiring and firing process.
I know we're almost out of time, but I actually have on my phone, I did my mid-year check-in with my assistant today. Mm-hmm. And here are the questions that we talked about. Do you feel like you're in the loop on what matters most in my world right now? Are there moments when you have felt underutilized or unheard in your role? If you could redesign our work relationship from scratch, what would it look like? We had a great conversation because she came prepared to talk about those things. Yeah. In a church setting, rarely do those things happen.
Right.
Corporations are better at it.
Right.
But it's never too late to do that.
No, begin implementing it.
Yeah. So if you're out there and you're thinking, I think I'm too wordy, ask people. They'll tell you if you're humble. The Glass House is executive produced by Angie Elkins, edited and engineered by Donnie Gordon with help from Nathan Howard, show notes and production help from Nikki Ogden, photography by Emily Bergeron and Bailey Watley, recorded at the Lifeway Podcast Studio in Brentwood, Tennessee.